Greetings, brothers and sisters. Let's go ahead and take a trip down the rabbit hole regarding the ancient Miwok people and the territory that we call California, as well as Francis Drake, who was the one that made the claim of that territory for New Albion. Who was the Miwok people in California? And this is what came up. It said the Miwok are a group of Native American peoples who traditionally lived in the southern Sierra Nevada, the Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta, and along the California coast. They were hunter-gatherers known for their elaborate basketry, acorn harvesting, and sustainable lifestyle, which was deeply tied to their animalistic or animistic beliefs and reverence for nature. Historically, they were divided into distinct groups such as Coast, Lake, Bay Plains, and Sierra Miwok, facing significant challenges from the European contact, but with many descendants continue to preserve their culture and traditions today. Okay, cool. Well, if any of you know any history regarding California, as well as the claim that Francis Drake had made for Queen Elizabeth I, we're going to go to Albion, because that territory that we just read in regards to the Miwok people was also known as New Albion because of Francis Drake landing there. So let's go ahead and read about New Albion. New Albion, also known as Nova Albion, in reference to the archaic name for Great Britain, was the name of the continental area north of Mexico. All right, so the continental area, so that's all of what we would call modern day United States, north of Mexico, claimed by Sir Francis Drake for England when he landed on the North American West Coast in 1579. All right, so once again, it's the West Coast that he landed on. This claim became the justification for English charters across America to the Atlantic coast, and soon influenced further national expansion projects on the continent. Drake's landing site has been identified at Drake's Cove, which is part of Point Reyes National Seashore. All right. And here's a little image of what they created in the drawing. Francis Drake, Miwok people. Francis Drake, Miwok people. Here, that's the king, the crown. Alright, and once again, this is an engraving. Established June 1579. Alright. Alright, so we want to read about the people and the land. It says, by using detailed descriptions of the people encountered by Drake, particularly the houses, feather baskets, ceremonies, and language, anthropologists have clearly identified the people as Coast Miwok, a people whose traditional homeland included the Point Reyes area in what is now present-day Marin County, California. When Drake landed his crew, the Coast Miwok people initially approached his encampment, while armed with bows and arrows, uncertainly cautious regarding the newcomers. But Drake quickly allayed their suspicions, and multitudes of unarmed Miwok soon visit his encampment on a daily basis. In their early encounters with the Coast Miwok, Drake's crew observed as the Miwok wailed and engaged in self-laceration. Drake misinterpreted this response as an act of worship and concluded that the people believed him and his crew to be gods. However, this Miwok custom was actually one of the mourning. Alright, so they were mourning them. It says most likely the Miwok regarded the English visitors as relatives who had returned from the dead. Key point, they regarded them as relatives who had returned from the dead. And now why would they think they were relatives? Because they probably had looked the same just as they did. Same complexion and all. Alright, and we know the indigenous people in America were melanated people. So this have to mean that these folks look just like those folks who were here. Melanated people. Alright, and let's see where this information coming from. Rose and Beans, 2022, California, and Interpretive History, New York, McGraw-Hill Education. Alright, so AI says the Miwok people generally have been historically described as dark-skinned people varying in shades of brown, often with a reddish or copper undertone. Alright, so historically, their physical appearance was described as dark skin, sometimes described as reddish brown or tawny color, which is the color of tan leather. Early complexions characterized their complexion as nearly black compared to tribes further north. Hair typically long, straight, thick black hair. Other features, shorter stature, flat noses, and wide mouths, were also noted in historical accounts of the Bay Miwok. It is important to note that skin tone can vary greatly among individuals within any group due to genetic sun exposure and admixture over centuries. Modern Miwok individuals and other Native Americans display a diverse range of complexions and physical traits due to intermarriage and individual genetic variations. So, as we can see, based off of the description of the Miwok people, the Digger Indian stereotypes Californian, their complexions are much darker to that of the tribes further north, after being nearly black. That's the Miwok. Journal of Californian Great Basin Anthropology, the Digger Indian stereotype in California. It says, thus, despite the presence of Madu, Nisnan, Miwok, Washoe, Yakuts, Manche, Tuba, Tubo, and other portrays of portraits of, let's see, okay, just read a little bit on this. It's the Digger Indian stereotype. The indolence and slothfulness portrayed here are congenial to an even more widespread stereotype in American culture, that of blacks. In the 1850s, the California Indian Indenture Act sanctioned what amounted to slavery for Indians, especially Indian children. Intriguingly, we find numerous references to Indians as having Negroid features. Speaking again of Central Californians, Bancroft notes that their complexion is much darker to that of the tribes further north, often being nearly black, so that with their matted, bushy hair, which is frequently cut short, they present a very uncouth appearance. The indication of mourning practices notwithstanding, these references give rise to the speculation as to whether Indians were being symbolically equated to black slaves whose status was well established and accepted everywhere. Often they were compared outright to their disadvantage. An opinion was expressed in 1851 that, unlike blacks, the Indian was incapable of any act of handicraft that involves the slightest exercise of mind and judgment. And then this is the Bay Miwok of Contra Costa County and resource for teachers and students, lesson 5, clothing and appearance. So this is what they're teaching, or what should be known up there in California. And we're going to go straight to appearance. And it says, the men and women of the Bay Miwok tribe have been described as short, dark-skinned people with long, straight, black hair that fell over their backs and shoulders. The hair was only cut as a sign of mourning when a close relative died. Their noses were flat and their mouths were wide. They used clam or oyster shells to pull hair away from their faces. Tattooing was found on both men and women. It was usually done in straight lines on their chin and all the way down to their navel belly button. I apologize. Alright, so once again, brothers and sisters, that's the Miwok people who said that the English, which was Francis Drake now, were their dead relatives who had came back alive. And the only way that they can be recognized as a so-called relative, they had to have the same complexion as them. They had to look like them. And we know, based off of the research and the history of England, that they were the same people. They did look the same. All right. And it's not like they had never seen these people before, because they were referencing other tribes that they knew and could have claimed was related to them, but they chose to say the English. So based on contemporary accounts from those who encountered him, the English seaman Sir Francis Drake had a ruddy complexion. Descriptions from his time, including depositions and historical accounts, consistently provide details of his appearance. Complexion, described as ruddy or fair, suggesting a reddish or healthy, sun-flushed skin tone. Stature, generally noted as being low in stature but thick-set and very robust. His hair and beard had a brown hair and a fair beard. Continents. Observers often mention he had a fine or cheerful countenance. Other features, one account mentions he had the mark of an arrow wound in his right cheek. Portraits from the period, such as one in the National Portrait Gallery, London, also depict these features, although the colors in some paintings may have faded over time. Now, since we're focusing on the time frame that they were speaking about, which is the 1500s, we need to know how ruddy looked or referenced in the 1500s and how they described it. So it says in the 1500s, a ruddy color was a warm, blood-like red achieved through various dyes for textiles and pigments for art. The most vibrant and expensive reds came from cochineal, a beetle introduced to Europe from the Americas, which created a brilliant scarlet color for the wealthy. Common people wore less expensive, duller red fabrics dyed with madder root from plants or reds that faded more easily. Alright, so as we can read that red color that you see in a lot of European art is actually was introduced in Europe from the Americas. So they did know about America. They did know about America. Pay attention to a lot of the colors that they use in a lot of the art. And like it says, in the 1500s, the Renaissance and early modern period in Europe, ruddy skin generally referred to a healthy, glowing, or reddish-brown complexion, often associated with vitality and a life spent outdoors. It was distinct from the highly prized pale skin, blah, 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 blah. All right. And this right here, we can call it ruddy skin complexion. Red skin, which most of the indigenous people in America was known as redskins, is because of the red undertone of the brown upper tone. All right. So, as in describing of the Miwok people, which they described the Miwok people as being brown to dark black, and we can see that this will be the closest representation of their ancestors if the Miwok and the English people pretty much were of the same complexion or were the same people. And as we can see based off of anecdotal evidence, yes, they were the same people. One from a different time frame, especially if you don't understand the history of the antediluvian period, right before the Great Flood that wiped out the land giants in this territory that we call America today, which is actually ancient Albion. All right, so brothers and sisters, just do the research, pay attention to what they said and their words during that time frame, because if you try to go based off of the modern interpretation, you're going to be confused. You must go back to the mindset of those people who were writing these books at that time. All right, peace.